All right, we are live.
We're live.
Hey. Welcome everyone to Design Unfiltered 12, I think it is.
Is it 12?
Yeah, I think it's
13.
XIII now.
Okay.
So as always, it's hosted by me, Joanne Weaver, Erica Fortgang, Jared Tredly. We are all experienced UX and product design recruiters based in New York, but we work, all around the globe.
Yes.
And we are really excited to have Dave Hoffer with us today as our esteemed guest. And Dave and I met rather recently, actually, through Tori McKinley, who I've known for a long, long time. So you guys are Frog alums together. And Dave, I felt like when I first met you, I felt like we had known each other forever. And it just became this like really beautiful conversation that went in so many different directions. And I just love the way your brain works. And you have so many ideas about design and leadership, but things outside of design, like you just have this beautiful, beautiful mind. And I've really enjoyed it. So just a little background on Dave. He is a design leader from McKinsey, PwC, Frog Design, as well as multiple startups and his own consultancies. So he's got the entrepreneurial spirit going on. He's a really big name in the design community and creates community regularly. So he's a constant educator. He writes regularly for Medium, LinkedIn. He facilitates at multiple conferences, including Lou Rosenfeld's conference, which I would love to go to one of those one of these days. And he also has been, am I saying this right, that you co-host the East Bay UX meetup for 15 years, or you started it, or?
Ooh, I didn't start it. And I'm like loosely a co-host, right? It's really just a group of us. We just get together on a relatively regular basis, but it's just friends that I've had for years and years and years. So it's a lot looser than that, but I'm happy to chat more about it.
I think we can call it co-host. You can call it co-host.
Yeah.
Sure, I'm a co-host. Sure. Co-host.
Close enough for government work, right?
100%.
Awesome. So welcome to Design Unfiltered, Dave. It's so nice to have you.
Well, thank you so much for having me today. I mean, and to your introduction, like we just met, but yeah, I feel like we're kindred spirits. I'm originally from the East Coast. I grew up in New Jersey, but right near New York. So feels like home chatting with you. You've got sort of that New York attitude, which is both can be considered sort of challenging, but I love the challenge. But certainly, like you and I are kindred spirits for sure. And Jared, we just met as well, and Eric as well. And thank you all for having me on Unfiltered today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Super fun to be here.
Definitely.
Yes, and welcome also to all of you guests who have joined us. So welcome to the live livecast as well. So we'd like to open things up with a few questions. Jared, you want to start off with the first question, or Erica?
Yeah, well, our go-to is often we like to know where people are, where you're watching from, where you're tuning in from. Anyone that's there live, that's watching right now, especially on LinkedIn, if you drop a comment and say where you are, we'll see it. And everyone else that's watching will get to see it as well. So it's always fun. Please drop a comment for those watching and tuning in right now where you're watching from. We're in New York. Obviously, the three of us. Dave, you're West Coast. Sorry, you're SF.
West Coast, yeah. Oakland, California is my home. I've lived in Oakland, for the last 16 years. Yeah, East Bay, Oakland, but I've been in the Bay Area since '94. So spent a bunch of time in San Francisco, all over the place. But yeah, Toronto, excellent.
Toronto, Canada.
Malta,
welcome.
Malta.
Yeah,
wow.
Yep, RJ from Malta. Thank you.
Yeah,
Josh, also in Oakland. Right on. Hey, Josh.
Hey, Mark. Hey, Josh. Good to see you. Thank you for joining.
Nice.
People I know.
Awesome.
Yeah,
awesome.
Good people.
Recognize some of these names and LinkedIn profile pics.
Sev.
Yeah.
East Bay.
Hooray.
Nice.
Great.
Cool. Wow,
Great.
you've really brought out a bit of this West Coast. Yeah.
I know.
Thank you, West
LA.
Coast. Sunny LA.
Yeah.
I love that.
Very sunny in New York today, actually.
Good.
Yeah, we got a bit of. I was a bit chilly. I had a quick ride on the motorcycle earlier, and it wasn't as warm as I wanted. But it's all right. That's right. Well, look, those comments will keep coming. We always like to do a couple of these quick quick questions, I think, at the start and get people chatting and get, find out more about who's watching and whatnot. But yeah, we were discussing a bit of a second question. Erica, you can maybe do a quick intro on this.
Our second question, usually we ask people about how they're feeling still, since our last event 2 weeks ago. How are you feeling in the market today? How many, I guess, maybe resumes have you redesigned in the last 2 weeks? Or how many, I don't know, applications have you guys all sent out?
Yeah. What's the sentiment? What's the vibe on the market? What are you thinking, Joanne? You've just come back from a little bit of time off. I guess you took a quick vacation, but what's your vibe on? Did you walk back into 8 million? Companies all needing to hire great design talent tomorrow.
Oh man,
maybe
like 2022, baby.
Maybe, yeah.
No, it's not 2022 yet.
Okay.
But I'm feeling, I think we've all been talking about this through the weeks, and Dave, I'd love to get your take on this too. I like to say cautiously optimistic, right? I feel like things are starting to come back. We're starting to get some inbound as opposed to all of it being a kind of outbound. So we're, but then there's also, there's things that, falter. Like we had something we were working on, principal UX role. We were really killing it. And then all of a sudden it dissolved, right? There's just, business needs come in. And so, I wouldn't say it's like super solid ground yet.
Yeah.
But, I think we were talking about this with you, Dave, a couple of days ago, and we all had our little kind of pre-powwow. It's like we've been through the industry, we've all been in the industry a long time. And Dave, you and I especially, we've been in this since early aughts, late 90s. We've seen lots of ups and downs. Like what's your take on the market right now?
Yeah, it's exactly as you described, this ups and downs. It's a wave, right? It's been a particularly challenging downturn in this portion of time. Post COVID and other things that have gone on. And so we maybe are at the bottom of the top, but where I think we're coming up. I feel like it's coming up. I'm seeing a lot of openings to the discussion, right? Just seeing a lot of possible, places that designers can go be, and that's awesome. But, I've seen a lot of downturns. The other biggest one that I got caught in was the bubble, when the bubble burst in the original internet, and there were 0 jobs.
Wow.
And I was out for 6 months. And the thing that my dad said that was just really, really inspiring, because I'd been out for a while, and I said, I'm really nervous. I'm worried about finding a job. And he goes, do you think you'll never work again? And I said, oh, no, I'll find a job. And he's like, yeah, so just hang tight. And I did. I found a great gig, and a terrific job. So just hanging in there. So I think hope is really one of my key messages. And we were talking about this the other day. Holding on to hope, and leveraging that hope for what might be next for you.
We definitely want to delve into that more as we talk, for sure, because I think that's a great theme that we can really delve into. And also for everybody who's watching, we'll kind of have a discussion with Dave for the first, 20, 30 minutes. And then, think of questions too. Like as we're talking, we really love this to be an interactive community. So feel free to put your questions in there. If you want to comment on things that Dave or that we are saying in the moment, we really encourage that. Like this is, the loveliness of it being live is that we can all kind of, bounce ideas off of each other and be together in a group. So we certainly encourage that too.
Definitely. We don't always get access to the 4 of us in one room at one time sometimes. So yeah, please use it to your advantage if you like, and definitely fire away in there.
Yeah. For the third question, I was thinking, so we've been all talking about, and Dave, this is something we had talked about with you too, in terms of doing a live portfolio review. So these are things that, we've been talking about, like what are some things we can do with Design Unfiltered? What are some things that the community might like? Just want to get a kind of a pH test. What is it? Temperature check.
Yep.
Of are people into possibly us doing a live portfolio review? And Dave, I know that you've done these yourself too. I think the 3 of us have done them as well. Would people be interested in doing that? having us do that? And then would people also be interested in maybe being the brave one to volunteer your portfolio for us to look at? And for the record, this is not a slice and dice. We're going to, say all the negative things that we can about it. It's really constructive feedback. We'll absolutely say the things that we think are working. But I just think, picture is worth 1,000 words, and walking through a portfolio and just, seeing where maybe you're leaving money on the table, or like, oh, you're doing this really well, I think can just be like really helpful for a lot of people, just to see it being kind of critiqued and looked at through the lens of recruiters in real time. So I'm kind of selling the biscuit. I guess I'm
Yeah.
I don't mean to lead the witness. But curious if there might be some appetite.
Drop a thumbs up or a thumbs down if you yay or nay.
It seems like
go on, Dave.
I was gonna say, it seems like there's appetite for it. It also seems like we have to start thinking generally about moving past the singular notion of a portfolio and getting to maybe a broader perspective on what your quote unquote portfolio is and how it gets essentially sent along or displayed to folks. And so if we maybe stop thinking about it as a singular entity, it might feel like it's easier to begin to digest and to begin to produce or begin to modify based on what you're seeing. So I think there's a lot of open questions around your body of work versus necessarily your portfolio or your case studies or whatever we might have previously thought about it as.
I do. I feel like sometimes when I speak with people about their portfolio, I see people maybe a little bit frustrated with their own search. They think, if I just get this portfolio right, then I'll get the job. And it's sort of like, well, it's not always the purpose there of the portfolio itself. That body of work is going to get you in the room to then meet the people you might be working with, to discuss with them and hopefully agree on taking that job and working together. So that once that sort of goes to that stage, that portfolio really falls to the background a bit more there. So thinking that you're going to design this thing and put this thing together, and once you do that, it's going to solve all this problem of the search.
Right.
It's not necessarily the case, which maybe can take a bit of pressure off yourself that, okay, the reason I'm not getting a job is because this portfolio. It's like, well, it's a piece and it's part of, but it's not the be all end all. So, you can break it down a little bit, take a bit of pressure off yourself, but these are all stepping stones, and it's the starting point. It is the entry point to getting in the room. That's very important. But, 9 times out of 10, it doesn't actually get you the job at the end of the day.
It's the story you tell around the you go, right? So, and it's one expression, right? So if you send your link to your website and it has your work, okay, great. And maybe someone looks at it and says, I think this work is pretty good, but now I want to hear more. So to the point of a portfolio being sort of a singular thing, it's not. When I'm a hiring manager for folks, I'm looking for your portfolio to be something that you really dig into with me. So I want a presentation version of 1 or 2 of those case studies where that maybe online portfolio gave me a taste, flavor. I'm like, oh, this tastes pretty good. Now I want to dig in. So I want a presentation of that same material in maybe a different format. So I'm not looking for a candidate to come in and just flip through their website. I'd already done that. Right? Like, it's ready, right? So what I'm really looking for is for folks to come in and say, here's my work that I've done, and let me tell you what went wrong, or what went right, or what our impact was, right? We were so successful that, XYZ. And who did you work with, right? Because maybe you didn't do all the work, and likely you didn't do all the work. You're working with a team of people. I've almost never worked all by myself on a thing. It's always a group. What was your role, right? What did you do, and how did you participate with your colleagues and answer the questions and arrive at whatever the solution is?
Yeah. I remember I saw Nick Croats, who was working at Policy Genius at the time, and he since has gone on to be a design leader. And I was so struck with one of his presentations that he had at an IXDA event, where he was talking about this project that he was the lead on. and it actually failed.
Mm.
And I love that he started out with that. Of course, they came back, they tested their hypothesis, they, saved it in the end, right? So it was a positive thing in the end. But I love that he had the confidence to walk into something and say, this is how it actually didn't work.
Mm.
Yeah.
And that was really interesting because so many people, I think, are putting on these airs, everything has to be successful. Everything's got to be shiny and sheeny. And it's got to just it's got to have all these metrics. Metrics are great. Not saying metrics aren't. People love them. Sometimes I think they're, a little BS-y, but, people love them. But I think, in order to stand out, and I guess, Dave, this is a question for you too, it's things like that really made me the needle kind of scratches across the record, oh, this is different. Are there things that you could advise our watchers around, what are some things they could be doing more of, better of, things to maybe have them kind of rise to the top, be more special? What's some advice you could give around that?
100%. Your failures are not failures per se. Okay. Don't think of them that way. Think of them as learning opportunities, and they are. So the things that you did on the project that, maybe wasn't successful, didn't have the impact. It's not to say you didn't learn something about the work that you do, your craft, or your presentation, or the framework that you employed, or the research that you did in order to arrive at that solution. I worked at a startup. We built a product called the Cisco CIUS, CIUS. If you blinked, you missed it. It was among the first tablet devices on the market. So it was a capacitive touchscreen tablet device, 7-inch, before the iPad. We had a framework of a product, and we worked with Cisco to develop their version of what they wanted was a product that would arrive in the market and be a successor to what were at the time enterprise desktop phones.
Yep.
So they wanted sort of the next level. So you'd have this tablet, and it would sit on a dock with a handset and look like an old sort of style phone, but you'd be able to pick the tablet up and continue your call on the way to your meeting. Things like that. It tanked. Right, I said you blinked and missed it, and it failed because specifically bring your own device software like Mobile Iron and Good Technologies, among others, killed it in the marketplace. So I don't remember the last time I had an enterprise phone. I think I had them at McKinsey maybe, but I never used it. Right, it was always your cell phone. Right, so. Just the market just changed, and that change, that disruption of that software on your personal device made it such that you didn't need this thing anymore. But it was a lot of fun working on the product, a lot of fun working with my former colleagues from Frog to get the thing done, and working with Cisco to adhere to their style guide, and working with Android at the time to translate it into a tablet size, right? So moving to a 7-inch was arguably the first time that Android had been sort of considered for
stretched
a larger size. Yeah. So we were talking about all kinds of fun ways in which we could take advantage of the space and everything else, and it was just it was a good project to work on. So not a failure, in as much as I learned a ton. I was happy to work on it. It's a great story that I can tell, and to communicate to a potential employer, because not everything works out, and that's okay.
Yeah. And it's also maybe a good litmus test to see how they react to that. Are they are they scared of hearing about a failure? Maybe it's not the kind of place where you can fail in order to succeed, right? Because I think that's very integral to the design process. Okay, let's see what doesn't work to get to the thing that does work. And that's just great design process, right? And I think also too, from a recruiting perspective, if I have somebody who sends me their resume that says they're a UX expert, I'm not sold. And it's I've been doing recruitment, in the tech world for 25 years now. I'm not an expert. Like, I don't think any of us really are experts. Like, hopefully we're constantly learning. But I think when somebody puts that like label of themselves, like I'm an expert, it to me feels like, oh, I've stopped learning. Now I've like reached this comfortable plateau. I don't have to keep going. So I think there's a real confidence and a real trust that's built when somebody says, I don't know, or like, I'm not an expert, I'm still learning. That really makes me feel good about them as a candidate.
Yeah, I'm fully with you. The word expert is a turnoff. The word guru is a turnoff.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
If anyone ever tries to describe me as a rock star or 10x designer, like, oh my gosh, please don't say that again, because it just it's just.
I don't think I've heard that one. 10x.
10x engineers. Yeah.
Oh, never heard it.
Oh my gosh, I think it means to suggest that there are engineers out there or designers, whatever. 10x gets applied to a lot of different roles. That there are people out there who can produce 10x.
The strength of
the person. And
with one blow.
Yeah. It is just like, oh my gosh, please no.
Yeah.
It's like anything.
So can I ask then, like, Dave, how would you suggest people in their portfolios or on their websites sort of indicate like, hey, this is a failed project? Should they put that like at the top as a thumbnail? Because I know a lot of people in their case studies, they'll go through the case study and then at the bottom it'll say, unfortunately, this results. Was unsaid, right? Or and especially I think there's a lot of companies or anyone who signs like an NDA too, where they can't even show anything. So how? I guess that's a two-part question, but how would you?
Yes, there's two parts. I wouldn't necessarily label it as, a quote unquote failure. Certainly, I wouldn't use that word because again, like you're learning from whatever project, right? So, a structure for your portfolio is an excellent idea. So, what was the problem you're trying to solve? Who were you working with? What was the methodology you used to arrive at the solution, and what was the impact, if any? And if the impact was, I learned a ton, and you don't call out that it was, a massive hit in the marketplace, then there's maybe an implication that it wasn't a successful thing. I don't look at this work that I was just describing and talking about as a failure. Like the market sort of shifted and changed. So it ended up being sort of a good story to tell. But that's a story that I would tell in a conversation. And I think it's short-sighted if you're a hiring manager to look at a portfolio and say, well, I don't see any big hits in here and I don't see any big names in here, so I'm going to dismiss it. I don't think that that's a sort of a fair assessment of a potential candidate. So I think there's a lot of work to do in terms of the hiring process nowadays that we could fix and could be changed.
And what do you look for, Dave? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to the second part of the question.
The NDA,
right? Yeah.
Good points.
Great question, right? A lot of the work that I did at McKinsey isn't stuff that I would necessarily want to share. They play their cards real close to their chest, and so they don't like for you to share material. So redaction is one possibility. Simply not naming names is very helpful. And on the other hand, and I'll jump in here, the work, whatever the NDA that you sign, whatever the work is, like, it's your work, and you need to be able to communicate it to people in order to potentially get your next job. So in my entire career, which is 25 plus years, I've never had anyone come after me, some company that says, hey, you signed an NDA and you should never have shown this work. For the most part, the work is previous and it just doesn't matter as much in the market. So, but it's a decision that you have to make for yourself. I think that companies, based on what we've seen in the layoffs, maybe don't care very much about you as an individual in their company. They're like, well, you're not working here anymore. It's like, okay, well,
employee number 7829.
Yeah. So maybe I shouldn't care too much about whatever NDA I signed or not. And again, no one's coming after you. No one's ever come after me. No one's ever mentioned it. It's just never been a thing. But it is an individual decision. So redaction, just covering up names, covering up anything that would be identifiable is one option.
Yeah.
Not caring is a second option.
Mhm.
Or
Until
not
you're
showing.
sued, then you might
Yeah,
care.
until
Probably won't
but
happen, but
I've never heard of that happening. Here's
Never seen
another
that.
thing is
You
is
don't have to
I can
respond to the email threats. Yeah.
that's right. Well, but like you can show but not share, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So if there's a piece that I did at McKinsey, I would show it right in the context of a meeting, but I wouldn't send you the PDF or put it online. So
Right.
there's a lot of different options that you can
Mm.
do to get around that.
You know,
Dave?
there's, oh, go ahead. I was going to say something sort of
Go
related.
Yeah.
So I was in a conversation a few months back on LinkedIn where somebody had been laid off, and they didn't actually save any of their work, or they weren't able to get their work from the company. The company said, it's our work, it's our property, right? Somebody else
Sure.
at a big tech company was like, yeah, it is their property. And I was like, well, how many times have you requested portfolios from people? This is like a catch-22. How do we,
Yeah.
you either don't want it or you do want it. So this is just a reminder to everybody watching, like, save your work honestly all the time, I think,
Mhm.
right?
Yes.
Regularly, often. Yeah.
Often, you never know, as we
Back up
discussed,
those files.
we're line items, we don't mean anything. So keep your stuff. Even
Yeah.
if you
Your stuff,
like
I
to
mean,
create it.
one of the things that I like to tell people, and this is just a good practical tactical tip for when you've got to go recreate your portfolio later,
Mhm.
literally once a week, sit down and review the work that you did yourself over the course of the week, and grab an artifact or two,
Mhm.
and write a little blurb, almost like a journal.
Mm.
Okay, keep it in a place anywhere. It doesn't matter if you take PowerPoint or Google Slides or just on your hard drive, and just set aside that week's worth of work in a folder for that project, whatever. And then suddenly, like at the end of your time, or if you get laid off or whatever, you've got essentially the material, you've got that corpus, and it makes it much easier to develop a portfolio from that later on, because you don't have to worry about remembering. So now, which thing did we do, and what was the decision?
Mhm.
Like, key decisions, key artifacts, a short blurb about what happened. And if you can get in that habit, that journaling habit, makes putting a portfolio together a lot easier.
I love that idea, Dave,
Yeah.
especially
Awesome.
since I feel like so many people I reach out to might be like, oh, hey, I'm really interested in your job, but my portfolio is not ready. It's going to take me a couple months. By then, the job's going to be gone.
Yeah.
And I feel like
Yeah.
making a portfolio or even adding a new case study is like the bane of every designer's existence. So why not make
Yeah.
it easy on yourself?
Yeah.
Maybe it's even scheduling in like, okay, every Friday at 4:00, this is what I do. Like I journal my
Quick
experience. I take a couple
That's right.
screenshots. I put that in there. It's just like good hygiene.
Mm.
Yeah. You could do voiceovers, video too.
Mhm.
Never helped.
100%. I think someone mentioned that in the comments too,
Yeah.
like a little video, whatever
Yeah.
makes it easier for you to
Yeah.
grab that material and just, sort of set it aside. I think that's a great option.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask real quick, Dave, just on that flip side, like redacting work, stripping things down, you still want to display it. You don't want to come under fire, by that company. You, on the hiring side, have you ever looked at someone's work that was redacted, that was a redacted project, and still found the value you needed in it to know to speak to them? You did,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. Right. Like I've looked
yeah.
at redacted material, and although I like it less because it's redacted, and it is, if you're covering up the logo, it's like
It's a
you're
bit,
sort of mucking with the design in a way.
yeah.
Mhm.
And that's fine, but it has never been an impediment to me
Right.
to look at a piece of work and say,
Still
I
see,
see,
yeah.
I can absolutely ask the same questions. And if that candidate is giving, a story about the work that was done, that's much more important to me. I can sort of sit with them and talk with them. Or even if I'm looking at a portfolio before I brought them in to
Before,
talk with me.
yeah.
Yeah. I've got no beef with it being redacted.
You got
So
the
it's really,
signal, you bring
that's
them
right.
in, and then maybe they show a little bit more without sending it to you, or it being
Or,
publicly
or not.
available. Yeah,
Yeah.
or
Or
not,
not.
but you
Or
can
not.
still get the signal from things like that.
Plus, I would
Yeah.
think that'd be nice to see, like, oh, they're actually being, confidential. They're being discreet with information. They're being in integrity with what they've agreed to. Like, I think that's a good
Spot
signal
on.
for a company too, that somebody's not willy-nilly
Yeah.
sharing all this NDA stuff. It's like, okay, like we might be designing some things too that might be sensitive. They're going to also treat our work with confidentiality and respect.
Spot on.
Yeah.
Spot on, right? That loyalty to that organization, despite whatever circumstances were with that person leaving that organization, says a lot. So you're right, Joanne. It's
Yeah.
100% true.
I get a vibe sometimes in the market that the NDA reasoning is almost used as an excuse to not have any work to show and not get, oh, I really want this job, but I all my work's under NDA.
That's no good.
Well,
that's not an acceptable answer. Like the
I got
work
nothing to go off. I got no evidence. Yeah,
that's right. The work is evidence. The work is an expression of the story of the time you spent at that organization, and I want to see some of that.
Yeah.
So it's sort of like you have no work to show me is just not an acceptable answer. It sort of would be a turnoff for me as a hiring manager. I would say, thank you, appreciate you, but you got to be able to show me something.
Yep.
So,
Yeah.
And we just gave some options on what you can do. So there you go.
There we go.
We've eliminated all excuses. Excellent.
So Dave, when you are looking at, candidates coming to you for a role, for an open role that you have on your team, what are the most important things that you look at? Like, what are the things they really need to get right, whatever right means to you? And is there any sort of examples you can give or stories you have around, like maybe somebody that did something that was like above and beyond or really stuck in your mind or something that was really unique? Because I think I'm getting a lot of questions these days of like, how can I stand out? Like there's so much signal to noise. Like what would be your advice to people asking how they can stand out?
100%. This is, I think, really crucial. So first of all, I really look for process, right? I want to see what process the candidate has gone through to arrive at the solution. So I want to see, like I said, that framework is really helpful. What is the problem you're trying to solve? What steps did you take and what methodologies did you use to arrive at whatever solution was, right? So seeing just bright, shiny artifacts in a portfolio is never sort of a good thing for me. I'm like, well, that's nice, but how'd you get there? Right? What things did you do differently? What choices did you make along the way? And that could be directions that weren't necessarily in the final product. Right? It could be we tried this, and being able to tell me the story, like we tried this, it wasn't working, so we tried this other thing. Saying, my friend, I'm picking a real person's name. Yeah. My friend Robert Bales helped me with this presentation, and he was able to coin this term for me that was really, really helpful for me to communicate. So calling that person out and saying, hey, this person really helped me in this work, for instance. But yeah, I'm looking for things like that. And then, in the standing out, for the standing out question, all things being equal, it was a good story. I love the stories. I was at a company called Frog Design. Many of you probably have heard of it.
Heard of them.
A global design firm. So a woman came in and she had a great portfolio, and the candidate before them had a great portfolio. But when that woman pulled out some jewelry that she had been making, and she says, "Oh, I'll just show you this jewelry that I'm making." So it was a standout for me, and the standout was, here's a person that spends their spare time making stuff and is not afraid to show me something that is very, very different than what I would necessarily, be looking at. So I love that. Your portfolio is not a place to necessarily show writing. But if you've written, right, if you're talking about design or user research or any of the sort of the things that are sort of pertinent to what we're talking about, then I would love to read those things. These are the kinds of expressions of thinking, okay, and doing that I love to see, and they help me to make a different decision, a better decision, I think, about the candidate.
I love that. I had a very similar experience just late last week and this week of a designer accepting a role that he was kind of in a tech company, but in the fashion space and some e-commerce slant and stuff like that. And outside of their hands-on design work, their ability to push pixels and solve problems, they also had a physical vintage store. They were also working on some physical product design for some home goods, like a line that they were doing with their partner. And does that stuff only get them the job? No. But hearing these things and knowing that this person just ooze creativity at all times, and in this particular scenario, in this room with this company, that mattered so much more. And that person was the standout and that person got offered the role and accepted it. But those are the signals that I think I often like to pick up on and receive. And it, not everyone has a hobby outside of whatever, and that's fine. You don't have to, but I think don't be afraid to let that personality come through, and all these things in the periphery, they matter as well. There you go. That's why you're about page.
I love
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
That's agreed.
I
Yeah.
wanted
mean,
Mark, thank you.
Yeah, Mark, absolutely. Thank you. I mean, you put in your resume, like, here's some interests that I have, right? I like skiing, and I like, watercolors, and I like, hanging out with my family. Like, feel free to use that about page to show some of that.
Yeah.
It helps you to show who you are, because we know that we're not singular, right? I'm not hiring you because yes, I'm hiring you because you're a designer, and yes, I need you to have those skills and all of that. But like, we're going to be spending a lot of time together in this project, so I want to be able to, feel like we can make a connection, and building that trust and building that that relationship is an important aspect of working together, as we all know. So
Yeah.
Totally. Honestly, I think it was Monday, I spoke to somebody who is a great product designer looking for their next opportunity. And I had, I went through their LinkedIn and I saw that they had studied theater in an undergrad. So there was nothing on their portfolio about their theater background or outside of product design. And I spoke to him and I said, hey, like, your previous life was theater and everything, because I did something cool over the weekend. But he had that initially, then he took it away. He was sort of afraid to lean on that sort of difference. And I was like, my first thing that I look for on resumes is, who are you outside of work? What do you like to do? Like, I spoke to someone a couple months ago. I still talk about it. They made their own sea salt. And I think that's
awesome.
rad. It's so cool.
That's a great niche.
I know. It was
Get
like,
some?
and they roasted their own coffee beans. And I was like, this is awesome.
Wow.
And I think we're creative, so we can get away with this kind of stuff, right? Like,
not just get away with it, but we can thrive in that environment, right?
Yeah.
Josh in the comments says, look, a company will hire the person, not just the skill set. And that is, maybe 1,000% true. So, you make sea salt, tell me about that. That's fascinating.
Yeah.
Right. So, and especially if I'm a designer hiring designers, I love good stories. I love really interesting things that people are doing, and I want to know about it. So absolutely, or the theater is great too. Like, folks that I've worked with have done improv classes.
Yeah.
And those improv classes have been extremely helpful in your ability to present your work, your ability to not feel worried or nervous about getting up and talking in front of a group of people to present your work. So, I mean, you would be surprised if you looked around at yourself and you sort of gave yourself a holistic view and said, well, oh my gosh, I've got all these things that I've done that I can share, and that will help, I think, a lot.
Totally. I was at this networking event last night, and it was all different types of people. So people from like investment banking, finance. We were talking about, of course, resumes. They have to keep theirs to one page. It cannot go beyond one page. It has to be this font, this exact format. So they would never be able to put like hobbies or interests or anything, which is why I just love that we can sort of really do whatever kind of.
Sounds like a scene out of American Psycho, the business cards.
That business card scene, yeah.
Eggshell.
Eggshell, right.
What are these events you're going to, Erica?
I'm busting out, Erica. I love it.
I am. My goal this year is to get out of my house more.
Hey, all of us.
For sure.
I think,
it was fun.
Sorry, what, Erica?
Oh, no, I was someone's guest to this event. It was great.
That's great.
Yeah.
Just say yes.
Well, and I think also too, the things we're talking about, right? Like having interests, like somebody made their own sea salt, somebody makes their own jewelry, they're showing like all these things. It shows a zest for life, right? That they're involved and they're interested and they're curious, but these are all the great things that make a good designer too. So it's just all these little signals that I think point to the direction of like, oh, this person could be a good fit personality wise, culture wise too, but also as a designer. Like, I think these are all great qualities to have.
Yeah.
As a designer as well. And, as far as like looking at people's writing, I was repping a candidate who had just a blog post. It was a single blog post. It wasn't like he was a regular writer anywhere, but he had a post about his travels that he did across, I don't know, it was like 20 countries in like 9 months or something like that. So it was this really big trip. And it wasn't even that it was like related to design per se. It was just like his journal. But I really loved like how open he was, how vulnerable he was. He was talking about like his own insecurities and what he discovered about himself. He was a wonderful writer. Just his way with the written word was so strong that I'm like, oh, this person, I felt this connection with him. And I'm like, oh, he's a good communicator. And that's also good for the job, right? So even though he wasn't doing it for the job, these are all signals that I think can like be underlying around like, oh, okay, this could be like good signals that they could be good for the job at hand.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's signal cutting through the noise.
Yes.
And it's to Seb, I mentioned this in the comments, talking about sort of having a discovering mindset, right? And the idea is, if this person is willing to travel, to explore and be open to new situations and to sort of look out at the world, oh my gosh, that's someone that would absolutely stand out versus someone who's never left their hometown or something like that. I mean, that's an extreme example, but someone who's willing to do that. Or for the writing, and I love it. Not everyone does, but I love it. I love that you're willing to sit down and try to communicate an idea that you've had, and you're saying, look, this is who I am, or this is something that I'm interested in, or this is something that sort of happened, and let me communicate it to you. A lot of our work gets a written communication. A lot of our work gets presented, right? You stand up and present in front of a group of people. A lot of our work requires having an open mindset, working with user researchers. We're doing the research ourselves and being able to go explore in those ways. So all three of those things are spot on.
I love that. So I want to switch gears it's a good segue too, but just to switch gears a little bit. And we had talked about hope. And, from doing these design unfiltered every other week, we see, and Erica, I love your question that you ask most of these weeks of like, hey, like, how are you feeling about the industry? Are you hopeful? Is it just abysmal out there? Like, what's going on? So I feel like it's been kind of a roller coaster ride of people's emotions of like, oh, this is really hard. I've been laid off for 9 months. I'm really having a hard time. I'm getting all these take-home tests. I don't want to do them. And then other people that are like, hey, like I'm seeing some traction here, right? Do you have any thoughts you can give to the listeners around hope? Either, in terms of this industry, how to keep hope alive, what they could be doing just to keep things in perspective, anything along those lines.
Oh my gosh, this is one of my favorite things. I wrote an article a couple years ago in 2022, specifically titled Hope. And it was in response to an article that Jesse James Garrett had written in Fast Company. He was talking about, designers losing hope because, and not, it was right? Designers losing hope in large organizations because what was happening was the early part of the design work, right? The foundational work that is necessary for the latter part to actually work didn't scale in an enterprise organization necessarily, right? So it's one thing to build out a design system. It's one thing to crank out, wireframes in, let's say, like a feature factory where you're, in lockstep with the development team, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But that designers are losing hope, okay, in the context of that situation and not being able to go out and really explore the problem space and understand the behaviors of users in order to be able to, provide the best design. I think hope is something that all designers have to have, because it's one thing to examine the data and understand sort of the perspective of where that data is coming from, or the analytics behind the problem you're trying to solve. It's another thing to understand the users and how the users are working with your systems. It's another thing to be able to present the work and solve the problem, right? Draw insights from that information. But hope is a component of all of this, right? Just like we don't talk about sort of the intuition that a designer has in the work that they're doing, and saying, look, I can tell you as a designer, and I've been doing this for a while, that this color blue is going to work just fine. We don't have to test it to death. My intuition will tell you this.
Yeah.
So having hope is I think a component of how designers have to move in the world. And I think that it can be really challenging to lose hope in what seems like a hopeless scenario, especially if existentially, companies are laying off left and right. You're in the same boat as 6 of your friends who are also looking for work. It can be really daunting and really discouraging to look around the world that way. And then from an even greater existential perspective, if things are really sort of tragic otherwise, if the wildfires are a problem for you and you're really thinking about climate change, or if you've got other things going on in your life that are really challenging, all of these things add up. But I think ultimately having hope, or finding a way to have hope, is key. It's really crucial. We were also talking about this earlier, the notion that things are cyclical.
Yes.
Things are happening in these waves, right? And so we're maybe coming out of the bottom of this wave and coming up. And not to get political, but I was just watching the DNC. So for those in the United States, I think there's just a couple of people outside, but for those in the United States, we're going through an election cycle, and the tone and the zeitgeist has changed immensely over the last 4 weeks with our election cycle. And the word hope has come up a bunch of times. So it's like hope existentially and hope specifically in the work that you're doing to find a job, look for another job, do those kinds of things. So yeah.
Can I go a little back in time with you? You mentioned earlier the 6 months, the bottom out of the bust that happened at that time. How did you're a different version of yourself, a different time in your life, maybe a few less responsibilities perhaps, but how did you have hope in that time? 6 months, it seemed like your entire industry bottomed out. It's like, what is a designer even at this point? What do I do? What did you look for?
Yeah. So I know a designer. I'm not going to name names, but I know a designer who went back to work in a kitchen.
Yeah.
Right. He'd been a line cook and went back to work in a kitchen because he was like, well, there's just no work. So you have to do what you have to do, right? Especially if you're in a position where you've got, mortgage or rent or whatever. Right.
Yep.
I was living in San Francisco. I had just broken up with my fiance at the time. And she had moved back to New York.
I really went there, didn't I?
Yeah, it was a low point. It was a low point. And I'd been out of work for 6 months. And like I said, I got on the phone with my dad, and I was, upset. And
Absolutely.
I said, hey, what do you think? He goes, do you think you'll never work again? And it just happened to be enough of a trigger. And then serendipitously or fortuitously, 3 days later, an organization got back to me where I had to physically move from San Francisco. I had to move anyway because I was running out on rent. But a company in Monterey, California, hired me. It's a division of McGraw-Hill.
Yeah.
It was doing at the time, I don't know if they still do this, but they were doing standardized testing. Like if you would ask my 14-year-old self, like, hey, how would you like to work for a company that does standardized testing? And I'd be like, are you kidding me?
Get out of here.
But I was like, I need a job. I'll take whatever. And as it turned out, I spent 3 years down there. I was living right off the ocean in Pacific Grove, which is a town just below Monterey. So it's gorgeous. I made amazing friends that I still have today that are like my besties. And the work itself was really interesting and ended up being really, really interesting work, despite, the industry that it was. So I know all about, the testing industry and formative and summative testing, all these sorts of things, which, I didn't know before. So taking that, potentially negative scenario and turning it into a positive, but it was really scary for me at that time. There was no work, or there was very little work. So finding that job turned out to be perfect. And then things took a way upturn after that.
Had you not been in that position in SF at the time, say you were working and they knocked on your door, you might not have wanted to go for that role at the time. You might, relocating, I don't know, I'm here in SF, it might not have been the time, but then you wouldn't have those lifelong friends you have. And that's
right. That's right.
It's hard to see those silver linings maybe in these times, in the moment, but
if you're at the bottom of a trough, you're in this hole and you're looking up, your perspective is there's some light up there. Or maybe you're not even looking up. You're looking down and it's just dark and horrific, but you got to look up and see the light.
It's there.
And do whatever, right? Like there's plenty of things to do that can help. And if it means exercise or meditation or here's one of my favorite things. I love to get out and hack at my yard.
Yeah.
I'm not, excellent
Yeah.
at like, pruning trees, but I love hacking at my yard to clean it up. Right. And I get sweaty and it's a good sort of form of exercise for me that helps me to sort of clear my head and do what I'm doing. So.
Right.
Yep.
Right. It stops thought. You are connected directly into experience. Thoughts can tend to spiral down, especially if one does not have hope. I was just talking about this with my boyfriend this morning, where he's like, I can't wait to get out in the yard and just mow.
Yeah.
They just don't think. Like you're just like
mowing.
your personality doesn't matter then. Like you're just doing what you're doing and you're doing good work you can be proud of. There's something to that. And there's
a lot to that. Like if you've been throwing resumes into what I think of as sort of the black hole of I'm going to apply on Workday or one of these other sites and you never hear back, or you hear back very, very little.
Yeah.
That can feel extremely emptying and extremely discouraging. What I like about the yard work kind of thing is there is a visceral start, middle, and end. So you can say, I accomplished this today.
Yeah.
Visible progress.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
It helps you to feel better about, yourself. Like I got this done. I can check it off my list, and everyone's got a list of things that need to be done. So anything.
It's also a good
chicken coop.
Chicken coop.
Building a chicken
Love
coop,
it.
100%.
Awesome.
Yeah, because then you get eggs. It's awesome.
Hey, I know. What were you saying, Erica?
Oh, I was going to say, I guess when we're sort of in this rut trying to figure out what we're doing, applying, it's a great time for self-reflection. And I think we were talking to you about this, Dave. You might have some books or things to recommend to people in terms of like self-mapping. Sort of
I do, and here's the other thing, and this is also true of things that are going on. So the book, my friend Kim Lennox recommended a book called Life Brief to me, Life Brief, by a woman named Bonnie Wan. And Life Brief is the way she talks about it is your life brief. It's like a creative brief for your life. Okay. And within it are a series of exercises that she asks you to go through. And the idea is you're trying to get a better sense of yourself. You're actually sort of turning a design lens on yourself, which can seem and feel weird at first. So there's a series of exercises. Here's one. Okay. I'll give you an example. I'm just going to read this a little bit. So it's worth it. So you're prepared. I think talk about it. So like you're looking for it's a gap analysis effort. You make two lists. You make a list of the things that you think about yourself. Okay. Here's what I think I'm good at. Here's the good skills that I have. And you make a second list on the right or the left, however you want to do it. You say, here's things that I think people think about me. And then what you do is you look between those two lists and identify any gaps that exist and how you might address those gaps if you think they need to be addressed. But it's a whole series of these exercises that are extremely self-reflective, almost meditative, and very helpful for you to identify sort of what you want to do. And then this is also true. We've got a friend here in the Bay Area, a friend of ours, Danielle Malik, and she said, look, I don't think I want to be, in this design field anymore, designing these things for other folks. I want to help people. And so she basically said, look, I'm going to go out and I'm going to start a brand new business, and I'm going to help with housing in the Bay Area, which is challenging as heck. And she started a business with a colleague of hers where, and I said, you're still a designer because you're designing your business. So she's still sort of, but she's doing something else. And so, some people might say, well, she's opting out. And I say, I disagree with that 1,000%. I think it's wanting to do good in the world, right? And wanting to take a different direction. And I think, having worked in this industry for a very long time, a lot of things are still true about how challenging it is.
Yeah.
So, so there's that. But she took that different route, and honestly, that's okay, right? Like if you have to maybe switch gears a little bit, that's okay. Or if you've got to take an interim gig, that's okay. You got to do what you got to do.
Yeah, I can appreciate that.
Yeah.
Do you think Go, Joanne.
Oh, I was going to say, should we take a question from the audience? But it sounds like you had a question too.
Yeah, I mean, well, if we do have any questions from the audience, definitely let's call them out. I mean, to be honest, my question was leaning in a little bit to what Sandeep was asking, was a bit about.
Oh yeah, I was going to put that up there too. So there we go. Great.
Yes.
Perfect. We got the same brain.
We've covered our faces up, but we can see the question there. The role of design leaders, I think in transforming in 2024.
It's a good one.
Layoffs, design teams shrinking. Where, is it because we don't care about design anymore? Is that the issue?
Nope, that's not it. That's
Exactly.
not it. So I one of the things I like to say is this metaphor, the following metaphor. So in each of the downturns that I've seen, where something has happened and either the industry completely stopped or otherwise, in the downturns, what I've seen is as follows. In the movie Terminator 2,
classic.
The antagonist Terminator, was a liquid metal Terminator because they had to come up with an even more
new model
character than right. It was the T2, right? So or I forget what the actual model is, but one of the things about it is Arnold Schwarzenegger comes back as a hero, as a protagonist in this one, takes a shot at him and it blows that Terminator apart into his liquid metal bits. And then the liquid metal bits sort of come back together and sort of form together in the ground, and he comes back together again. Same with layoffs. So a bunch of people get laid off. I don't know if you noticed this, you may have or not. I have seen a lot of people coming together in little bits and pieces, starting up their own efforts, working together, spending time together, helping each other with portfolios. So I see this sort of, you get blown apart, but then you come back together. The people that you meet at your different roles are absolutely people that you may want to work with again, and therefore you both get laid off. Let's go do something else, or let's go do something to do this. And from a transformative perspective, go work in an industry that is not trying to make another photography app. I've said this for years. There's a billion photography apps out there, and Instagram hit it out of the park when they got bought. Great. Maybe that problem's been sort of solved already, right? So maybe go do something else and go work in an industry where design is a little less, very much needed, but a little less prevalent.
Yeah.
Right? So that's another thing to consider. And if you, I want to solve a very specific design problem, pick one that you ever worked on and say, I want to go work in this industry, or Danielle's story I just told is go start a new business that is solving this particular problem because I feel strongly about it and I get to sort of design my business. So those are, I think,
I don't think design's going away, is it? The same way the pieces of the T1000 didn't really disappear. They went somewhere else, but that piece wasn't lost. Got shot off, but it still existed. And same with design. I guess some of these companies and teams and structures are breaking apart a little bit and casting, these designers out there, but they're not, doesn't mean that designer is gone and then that skill is gone and that the need for design is gone. It's dispersing a little, it's being diluted into other areas, but it still exists. It's still in need. It's still part of it.
It's absolutely still in need. And I've been saying this as well. I think it behooves designers in 2024 to consider what I've been calling molting. Right?
Oh, yeah.
Shed the skin. Shed the skin that was your outer whatever. Okay. Shake it off. Itch a little bit, scratch a little bit, because maybe you're like, oh, good, I'm out of this. And then, move on. Right. You need to learn new skills. You need to do new things. You need to talk to new people. All of these are absolutely great activities that will, propel you forward. And no, design's not going away. It might be changing a bit. Right? Technology and AI has, I know, been a very big topic over the last couple of years, but go learn those things.
It's evolved before.
It has.
Yeah. I want to bring up Asha's suggestion here. I think this is in line with what you're talking about, Dave, in terms of discovering yourself. What's a new you? So she's talking about the book is called The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. So she has morning pages. There's artist dates. What I love about this is the book talks about, it's like a 12-week program to get you back in touch with your creative self. But I really look at it as it gets you back in touch with your self, right? It's not just creative self, but it's like your actual true authentic self. So I think it's a beautiful place for like self-reflection, talking about maybe some wounds you've experienced, some blocks you might have, people that make your, the crazy makers in life that come in and just, try to get you off your center. I just thought it was a really beautiful centering book. So I'm going to put that up in the chat as well. It's just
yeah. The book I was talking about is similar vein. It's sort of taking a different approach, but I can't wait to check this new book out. And I hadn't heard of it before.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I think, things that you do that help you to sort of move, in whatever direction is right for you. And I think that's maybe the key is what is right for you. So, most designers I've ever met have been pretty dyed in the wool designers. They want to design, they're like eager to solve problems. And if it happens to be that, the particular industry that you're in has these layoffs and they're like, great, go to a different industry. Right?
Yeah.
Look for the design problems that exist elsewhere. And there's so many design problems. Oh my gosh. There's so much that needs to be fixed in design.
Yep.
So much.
Yeah.
Love that. Okay.
Well, it looks like we're at time. I feel like we could just keep talking for hours and hours with you, Dave. This has been such a great discussion. So thank you so much for joining us. And sharing your knowledge and your wisdom and your own personal stories and experiences to really, help the people that are out there, give us hope, all of us, we all need it, and keep that in mind. And we'll stream this again, we'll stream this, we'll post it.
Post the recording. Yep.
In time, but
as well as a couple of those. Oh, go on.
Oh, go ahead.
We'll put the book recommendations in the links there as well. A couple of those, all that will be accessible for anyone to find later too. Yeah.
Any parting words you want to give us, Dave?
Oh my gosh! Thank you for having me first.
Thank you.
It's been super fun. I love talking about this stuff, and I'll do it all day long. Like you said, we could go on talking. Absolutely. Yeah. For folks who are on who maybe are not connected, I'm happy to connect. And talk more. I think that we're going to get past this. So my message is the hope, right?
Yeah.
Have the hope that you'll get past this and you'll move into either a new direction or the same direction, a different company or otherwise, but have that hope.
Yeah. Love that. Connect with Dave on LinkedIn. You do post things on there occasionally. You do link out to some of your articles and your writing. It's a good little hub to be in touch with yourself as well. So yeah, amazing.
Awesome.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much. Yay.
All right.
All right.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye for now.
Bye.